welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another video. Today's a sports video concentrating on the Formula 1 season, or lack thereof, and a potential alternative to this year's championship. Before we get going, if you could please click the subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and at the end of the video, if you did like the content, please click the like button, it does help out. So today's video, as I say, we're concentrating on the Formula 1 season, or lack thereof so far. Obviously the first 8 races of the season have been cancelled or postponed, and then with the rule changes coming in for 2021 that have been pushed back to 2022, the chassis freeze, the gearbox freeze, and not too much development to be done on the power unit side, are we really going to see much more of a difference in the championship with 2020 and 2021? Or is it just going to be 2 championships pretty much rolled into one really long season? I don't think there's going to be that much development to be done and any change in the pecking order, really. I know you might say that's a bit rich considering the last sort of 6 seasons with Mercedes dominating, but for example, if Red Bull and Max Verstappen were to win the title this year, does that make them a gimme for next year, do you think? So this got me to thinking of a alternative championship for this season. Not something for today's drivers, it would give them the full year off, but something that revisits an older idea of a Legends Championship. Nothing too serious, but legends coming back that drove for the team, so it's a relevant driver to the team. 1 car from each team being driven, so it's cut costs and saved money for them. And we get people returning to the sport, and we get to see some old faces in the paddock and on the track. So with that being said, we're going to work back from last year's championship order from 10th to 1st, with the driver from each team and who those drivers would be. So first we're going to start off with Williams, and their last world champion in 1997, Jacques Villeneuve. Great world champion, great driver, still a feature in the paddock today, and someone who still competitively drives. So it'd be great to see Jacques back out on track. Next we see the only driver to drive for Haas that isn't currently on the grid, and that's Esteban Gutierrez. I believe he drove for Haas in their debut season, so it'd be good to see Esteban back on track instead of the reserve or the test driver I think it is for Mercedes now. Next up would be Jean Alesi driving for Alfa Romeo, and that actually is the origins of Sauber. So we would see Alesi step into the Alfa Romeo of today, even though it's pictured there with the Red Bull sponsorship on it. Next up would be driving for Racing Point, Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Obviously never drove for Racing Point or Force India, but did drive for Jordan. There was 2 choices here, it was either Ralf Schumacher or Heinz-Harald Frentzen. As you can see, Frentzen still drives today competitively, not sure about Ralf. And I just felt Frentzen hit a few more heights with his career at Jordan and Williams in the Formula 1 paddock. So it'd be great to see Harry Heinz back on the grid. Next up, and driving for the new named AlphaTauri, we couldn't go a season without having a Verstappen on the grid, so it'd be Jos Verstappen. Maybe you could pick a few tips up from Max. Obviously got the links to Red Bull and AlphaTauri, but he obviously drove for Minardi, which is where what the AlphaTauri team came from. So it'd be good to see Verstappen back on the grid, and obviously young enough to still do it, I think. Next up, driving for Renault, would be Jarno Trulli. See if we can get him out of his vineyards and his wine producing and get him back onto a track. I think he still drives competitively today, so it'd be good to see Jarno back on track and back in a Renault. Next up, and an absolute icon of the sport, Mika Hakkinen, driving for McLaren. Double world champion for McLaren in 98 and 99, and I really think Mika could still go in a car of today. It'd be a great battle and great to see him out there with a few of the other drivers, and I think he could do some great results in that McLaren of today, all this season. Next up, driving for Red Bull, Mika Hakkinen's ex-McLaren teammate and Red Bull stalwart, David Coulthard. I think it'd be great to see DC back on the track against Mika in different cars, see who could come out on top in that battle. Obviously the Red Bull a superior car to the McLaren, but would Mika's talent just make up for that gap? But DC also, still active today and still does some promo and advertising work, marketing work for Red Bull. So he's obviously a little bit more used to the cars, so it'd be good to see that battle out on track. Next up, and driving for Ferrari, obviously wasn't going to go for Felipe. I think he's a little bit too young to be coming onto this grid and a bit too talented maybe, but I'd love to see Gerhard Berger out on track. Fantastic charisma and character in the paddock, still around today, So it'd be absolutely fantastic to see him back out in the Scuderia Ferrari. And finally, that brings us to the number 1 spot for Mercedes, and that would be Rubens Barrichello. Obviously never drove for Mercedes, but did drive for Brawn. Runner-up in the 2009 World Championship. So could Rubens actually get his first sort of world title win if this series were to happen and it was Rubens piloting the Mercedes of today? So that's our list. That's our drivers and our legends. Let us know in the comments if you agree with any of them, if you don't agree with them, who you would have in your legends lineup. And yeah, hopefully the Formula 1 season can get back up and running as soon as possible. It just worries me that, as I say, the next 2 seasons are going to be very, very similar to each other. So we look forward even more so now to 2022 with the rule change. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.